If you're playing up to 200 NL, there's a good chance you're stuck. You're most likely trying to play against the solver rather than against your opponent. You open it, you see that some hands check sometimes and bet sometimes. You try to remember and replicate what you saw. After the session, you review hands, compare to the solver, and either feel relieved that you played the correct line, which maybe isn't correct against the specific player, or you feel you made a mistake because you deviated, but maybe the deviation was exactly right. I call this the equilibrium trap. This happens because most people see GTO as a dogma rather than as a science. And what does this mean? A dogma gives you rules to follow, you never question the output, and all deviations are considered mistakes. The equilibrium is static and seen as a destination instead of being the result of continuous iteration, which is how the solver truly operates. This also has psychological benefits because complying with the solver output feels very safe and it removes accountability entirely. All you have to do is just playing. Questioning the output feels wrong because the solver knows more than you do, therefore you tend to blindly follow it. On the other hand, a scientific approach uses solver as a sort of model that you use to interrogate, and you just consider output as data that needs to be questioned. Not because you want to deny whatever appears, but you're trying to understand why what happens truly happens. The equilibrium is truly a circle. It's a point that you depart from and return to. We have no way as humans to create a perfect equilibrium such as solvers, but all we have to do is trying to understand the process that leads to that. And by doing this, we have to question. Questioning becomes our method, and deviation is the tool. A key insight to always remember is that you cannot exploit well without knowing the baseline. But the baseline is not the goal, it's the reference point from which real edges are found. The equilibrium can teach us what the baseline is, and of course it makes no sense talking about exploitative play without understanding what the baseline is. Otherwise, we're not deviating from the equilibrium, but we're just trying to justify our own assumptions. In order to understand what I mean, I would like you to show an example with a real deep solver dive. We have a single raise spot, MP versus big blind, where the middle position player opens to 2.5x and the big blind just calls. The flop comes ace-6-3 two tones. As the big blind, we check. Now the in-position player, according to the solver, has a mix between betting and checking with their entire range. This is a very high frequency bet spot, but as you can see, this is not a 100% c-bet situation. I've given the solver the opportunity to bet a quarter pot. Here, any small bet is fine. I'm going with the quarter pot for convenience, and I would use a pot size raise as the only raising size for the out of position player. This is a spot where raising small is not very effective and we want to raise either pot or close to pot. It's not super important to nitpick the correct sizing because the main idea is to understand that here the big blind wants to raise the polarized range, and this is one of the reasons why we don't see a 100% betting frequency. There are hands which really don't like facing a check raise here. Of course, all the pocket pairs, from pocket kings to pocket deuces, but even intermediate aces are not doing that well against the polarized raising range, as we can see right now. Let's say we go into the c-betting node, you can see that the raising range is super polarized. So we have pocket sixes, pocket threes raising all the time, ace sixes raising also most of the times, but you see that the solver is not really raising single pair hands, except with the exception of displays, which are very unintuitive for humans to understand. But displays are in the range, because otherwise some of the, I mean, you see these aces are folding out even better combination of aces. So if we never expect a human to ever fold ace jack to a flop check raise, you understand that it makes no sense to raise ace 9, ace 10, or ace 8. But in reality, these plays are in the equilibrium because the solver wants to make big aces indifferent against the check raise already on the flop. And you can see, for example, that even ace queen, which is a very strong hand, is already indifferent. So there is not much difference between pocket pairs and aces, because the check raising range is 2 pair plus. All of these hands are behind the value raising range of 2 pair plus. The difference is that the pocket pairs can improve to a set and beat all the 2 pairs and all the sets. On the other hand, with ace jack, you can improve to 2 pair and beat ace 6, but ace 6 is just a few suited combos, therefore it's not that meaningful. Therefore, and also you are drawing very narrowly against pocket sixes and pocket threes, even if you hit a jack on the turn. So on the other hand, if you have jacks or queens, you will overset them and win a massive pot. So the idea of the big blind is to win a big pot with their strong hands, therefore leveraging the pot size raise. And we can see a portion of the range which is, of course we have some draws. We can select them here. You can see a lot of flush draws, which would be the natural bluffs. We can see 5-4, which is the open-ender straight draw, which is a natural bluff. Some gutters like 7-5 suited, 7-4 suited, again natural bluffs. But then we see a category of hands that some players might just call with: 7-6, 6-5, 4-3. This is 2 pair, of course, so it's raising for value. 3 deuce. So you see a lot of low pairs that are turned into a bluff. Now let's see what happens if we assume that the player is just raising a little bit less than what they're supposed to. So here we have a 13.46, and now we're going to node lock a little bit less of raise. So we're going to 3, set strategy on lock node. And we will just input that the single pair hands will not raise. We will leave the rest untouched. We even have some random combo of pocket nines in the equilibrium, which again is not something we expect ever to happen in practice. So we just filter these hands. We set the raise to 0. Also have to include the 6-4 here. So we have a discounted raising frequency. Now we just go here and push go until it recalculates the equilibrium. And this is how the equilibrium works right now. So we see we have around 11% of raise in terms of frequency compared to the 13.46. But what has changed dramatically is imposition strategy. Without touching anything from the imposition part, the solver is now exploiting the fact that the out of position player is not raising enough bluffs. And the exploit is that now it's betting 100% of the range. The out of position player is still defending the same hands as before, but now instead of instead of raising aggressively a portion of the range, they're just calling. So the defending frequency is the same, it just changes the composition. And there is another major difference. As we said before, the big aces were indifferent against the raise. But now, if we input a raise, we can see that the big aces are always folding unless they have a redraw. And by redraw, I mean a diamond. On the one hand, you might think, aren't we blocking bluffs? Yes, we are, but having a diamond gives you some parachute and some redraw against hands which are already ahead of your hand. So we fold much more. We bet our entire range, but with the idea that we will overfold against the raise because villain's range is going to be much stronger. This is very important. Every exploit has two sides. So on the one hand, we are more aggressive, but we are more aggressive because we know that we can get away if the opponent shows resistance. We're allowed to be more aggressive because the opponent cannot punish aggression. On the other hand, whenever we see aggression, we have to adjust and not fall back into the original equilibrium, but understand that in this case, we just have to massively overfold. And again, we can also check the EV of the options. They are not zero EV anymore, these calls. They already become minus EV plays. One way to frame this problem is understanding what the right questions are. In this case, whenever you see an equilibrium like this, the first question should be, what would my opponent have to do to punish me if I bet 100% of the time here? Followed by, would he actually do it? As we already saw with the solver dive, if the answer is no, it means that his tendencies are too passive. Betting 100% of the time against him is not a mistake, even if the solver will tell you when you analyze the hand that this hand was supposed to check 30% of the time. The main thing, again, remember that you have to overfold against aggression. And therefore, all our zero EV decisions in theory become much easier because zero EV means that you essentially have to randomize not to give an edge to your opponent, but you already know that your opponent is actually giving you the edge because you know that you can overfold, they are too passive, therefore the range is too strong. This strategy gains more EV than the equilibrium solution, so it nets you more money in the end, and it's much simpler to execute. And we can see again a snapshot of the exploitative strategy, which you can see it's much easier to execute because whenever you split between bet and check, you need to balance the checking range if you want to be close to equilibrium, and this is very hard for a human being to do. It's easier for a machine, but for a human it's harder to achieve it, and moreover, it's not even necessary because this strategy, if it's an exploitative strategy, therefore it makes more money than the equilibrium solution against the player that cannot take advantage of it. Of course, this strategy doesn't work against a player that is raising very aggressively and knows how to put pressure to medium strength hands on multiple streets. So if you are up against a very aggressive player, you have to be a bit careful about considering betting your entire range because they're going to put you to the test up to the river. So even if you face the problem of the flop raise is not that you have to call a big raise with a medium strength hand. The problem is that there is a future threat of bets on turn and on the river that can make you play for stacks with hands you don't want to play for stacks with. Learn to leverage the equilibrium. Do not blindly serve it. Like and subscribe to find your hidden edge.